Hello there everyone, welcome to the channel if you're new, and welcome back if you aren't. I'm EDJ, and we finally have arrived to the Battle of Leipzig, the Battle of the Nations. I think this is the biggest battle of the Napoleonic Wars, and arguably kind of the most important. I mean, that's debatable, obviously, but at least for Napoleon's grasp of power, I think, because this was like Napoleon's big gamble. If he had won this battle, he probably could have cemented himself as the power of Europe, and it would have even been more impressive, because not only are the coalition completely jumping him right now, but in terms of military might, he lost a great deal of it in the Russian invasion, you know? And so essentially it would be like, here Napoleon is without his cavalry, which he relied so heavily on. You know, he lost a lot of that, and he's relying a bunch on teenage conscript, Napoleon and his teenage army. You know? So yeah, if Napoleon had won this, I think it would have sent a message, probably would have, like, cemented him as the power of Europe, you know, the leader, the general of Europe, and that it probably would have broken the morale of the coalition for a long time. Like I said, like, he lost his main army in Russia. If he wins this, like, I think, like, in some alternate history, the coalition, I still do think there would be probably more coalition wars down the line, but, like, he probably could have bought himself a good few years, you know, of relative peace and people not wanting to mess with him, you know, if he had won this. But unfortunately he didn't. He didn't, and I think this was one of the last two chances Napoleon had at realistically holding his power as Emperor of France. Like, the first is he either wins Leipzig, I think that's the only way he's staying Emperor of France, and the second, after he loses Leipzig, the Frankfurt proposals, those, in my opinion, are the only two chances Napoleon had at remaining Emperor of France. Some people are a bit iffy about Waterloo. Some people say if Napoleon had won Waterloo, he could have forced a peace, and that was actually his plan. I'm on the side that it's not doesn't think that. I think even if he had won Waterloo, he wouldn't have lasted long. I really think at that point Europe was done with him. They weren't willing to negotiate him on Europe as Emperor of France. You know, but that's just my opinion. We could talk about that when the Waterloo video actually comes, but, yeah, like, it's gonna be interesting to see, because I believe this battle took place in a span of 4 days. France was fighting on all sides, different nations, and it's just, yeah, Napoleon's biggest gamble. He put it all on the line, like, if I win, I am the master of Europe. If I lose, I've lost, you know? And we're about to see, like, it's sad, but yeah, Napoleon loses arguably the biggest battle of his reign, the make it or break it battle, if you will. So it's gonna be a little sad that we've gotten here. And then there's only 2 more videos after this. We're gonna watch his campaign for France and Waterloo, and then we're kind of done until, you know, I'm gonna jump to Napoleon's marshals, obviously. But, yeah, guys, that's that's quite this has quite been the journey, and I'm a little sad thinking it's gonna end soon. But you know what? We're not there yet. So, let's get to it. Let's watch, you know, the Battle of the Nations from Epic History TV. By the way, if you want to watch this video without me talking or my face here in the corner, the link to this video is down in the description down below. Without any further ado, let's get to it. Let's watch Napoleon 1813, the Battle of the Nations. Between a battle lost and a battle won, the distance is immense, and there stand empires. These profound quotes
October
I love in the series.
1813. Napoleon Bonaparte faced his greatest crisis since becoming Emperor of the French 9 years before. His long war in Spain had ended in defeat, and an Anglo-Spanish-Portuguese army had now crossed the Pyrenees to invade France itself. In Germany, the Kingdom of Bavaria had switched sides and joined the Sixth Coalition against France. While in Saxony, Napoleon faced 4 armies converging on him from all directions.
Man, it's so weird to think. I love the alternate histories you can do with Napoleon. Honestly, if he had won this battle, it probably would have been his greatest victory, arguably, right? Even more than Austerlitz? Like, who knows? Like, if Napoleon had won this, maybe people would probably say this was his most impressive victory. I don't know, in terms of, like, odds and, like, the things are not favorable to him, you know? I don't know. Arguably. Man, I really wish I could, like... I wish I had a power to, like, see alternate, like, realities and just see, hey, what if Napoleon didn't make... won Leipzig, or didn't do this and that? I don't know. Like, how different the world would be, right?
What's more, these were not the same bunglers he'd crushed in 1805 and 6 at Austerlitz and Jena. Prussia, Austria and Russia had all learned from their mistakes.
Yes.
They were now better organized, trained and led, and more wary of Napoleon.
Yeah, that's what the Napoleonic Wars got more bloody because everyone was improving. Like, you know, Napoleon, I still think even by the end, was head and shoulders above everyone, but the gap was definitely getting closer. Like, you know, when it first began, as far as possible, Napoleon is still, like, above everyone, but they got higher, and as a result of this, like, increase of military, like, you know, innovation and competence, like we saw with Austria and Charles, like, yeah, things got bloodier because people were getting better, and you have to kind of give it to Napoleon. He kind of, in a way, elevated Europe in terms of military. Like, all of Europe and, like, the world, arguably, got better because Napoleon, you know? I guess that's kind of the thing with every great conqueror, right? Like, with Alexander the Great, everyone for a long time was just mimicking him, and it's like, yeah, when someone great shows up, this, you know, once-in-a-generation, like, leader, yeah, people just learn, and, you know, the thing is, the better people get in wars, the more bloody when everyone's, you know, really good. Because it's not a complete stomp. Like, Napoleon, when he first became emperor, was just stomping these guys, you know? It's like, the victories felt, like, one-sided, but, like, as things have progressed in the series, you see, yeah, Napoleon might be winning, but the wins are costing him a bit, you know? I don't know. I think what impressed me most is Prussia's advancement. Like, Prussia, when it, you know, kind of had this famed military reputation, they got stomped by Napoleon, like, completely, like, decimated in the War of the Fourth Coalition, but they improved a lot, like, especially Blucher, who was instrumental in the defeat of Napoleon at Waterloo, you know? It's like, the Prussians, they learned a lot, and I think it's their improvement that impressed me the most, you know? You gotta give it to the Prussians, man.
The largest coalition force was the Army of Bohemia, commanded by Austrian Field Marshal the Prince of Schwarzenberg. His was a huge mixed Austrian-Russian-Prussian army of 194,000 men and 790 guns. To the north, Blucher's Army of Silesia, and the Army of the North under Napoleon's ex-Marshal Bernadotte, now Crown Prince of Sweden.
Boo,
Together,
Bernadotte!
130,000 men and 536 guns.
I kid, guys.
To the southeast, General Bennigsen's Army of Poland, besieging Dresden. Another 34,000.
And there's Bennigsen. I'm kind of really like that we got into the point of the series where I just know everyone. Like, I know all the names on the field. And I'm like, hey, I remember you. Hey, I remember you. Like, you know. I don't know, I kind of like that. I've learned.
Men and 135 guns. In total, the coalition had fielded 360,000 men and 1,500 guns, with Russia supplying the bulk of the troops.
That's insane.
One unique addition to Bernadotte's Army of the North was a single troop of British rocket artillery, an experimental weapon system based on the Congreve rocket, a type seen here in 1830. Although wildly inaccurate, their high-explosive warhead could be devastating at close range. Napoleon's forces around Leipzig were outnumbered almost 2 to 1. But with 200,000 men and 700 guns, the Grande Armée was still a force to be reckoned with many experienced troops and commanders, even though it increasingly relied on young conscripts to make up numbers. There were another 140,000 men that Napoleon could not call on. General Rapp's 10th Corps besieged in Danzig, Marshal Saint-Cyr's 1st Corps besieged in Dresden, Marshal Davout's 13th Corps holding Hamburg.
Oh, Davout. Oh man. Napoleon should have brought Davout with you, man. I think Davout could have definitely turned the tide. By the way, I'm joking. I don't know if I've gotten on anyone's nerves with my constant Davout fanboying. But man, I think he should have been there. I think Napoleon should have brought him. I still think he's the best marshal, in my opinion. Like, I would have him in, especially in these big battles like Waterloo or like Leipzig. Like, I would have brought Davout. I feel like he definitely could have also aided tremendously, you know?
As well as several smaller besieged garrisons across Germany and Poland. Napoleon was currently about 20 miles north of Leipzig with the Marshal Murat was 40 miles to the south with 90,000 men, covering Schwarzenberg. Napoleon now decided to rapidly join Murat, and with their temporary superiority in numbers, defeat Schwarzenberg, before Bernadotte and Blücher could intervene. Murat had orders to conduct a fighting withdrawal northwards. But at Liebert-Volkwitz, he was drawn into major combat with the enemy's advance guard. Around 12,000 horsemen fought what some have described as the largest cavalry battle in Europe's history. Murat, in the thick of it as usual, was very nearly captured by Prussian dragoons. The battle ended in a minor coalition victory, with around 2,000 casualties on each side. The next day, Napoleon arrived to take command. This video is sponsored by...
Children, today is France's last day. Tonight we must have one or all be dead. Day one, man. Insane.
By the 16th of October, Napoleon had concentrated most of his forces south of Leipzig. Field Marshal Schwarzenberg, meanwhile, against Russian advice, had deployed his army on either side of the Pleiße River, which would hinder his movements throughout the battle. Napoleon had entrusted the northern sector to Marshal Ney, with orders to keep an eye out for Blücher and Bernadotte. But Napoleon didn't expect them for at least another day, and so Ney had orders to transfer most of his troops south for the attack on Schwarzenberg. Schwarzenberg, however, knew that Blücher and Bernadotte were closer than Napoleon suspected.
Dang it.
And that Bennigsen was also marching up from Dresden.
So it's logistics that might be the undoing of Napoleon, huh? He expected... Yeah, so Napoleon's plan is kind of the usual, and what I mean by that is divide and conquer, take out an enemy unit, move on to the next. You know, overall, worked brilliantly for him so many times before. But yeah, I think here it's probably, I'm guessing the fatal mistake is he's assuming they're further than they actually are. And as, you know, he's fighting, trying to take these guys out, they're gonna come and he's gonna end up having to fight on all directions.
This was the moment the coalition had been waiting for. All their armies converging on Napoleon, with overwhelming superiority in numbers. However, the coalition's headquarters were nothing like Napoleon's, where one man's will decided all. Schwarzenberg had to attempt to coordinate the actions of 3 large armies from 3 separate states. And although he was commander-in-chief, his plans still needed to be approved by Emperor Alexander, the supreme commander, whilst he also managed relations with the King of Prussia and the Emperor of Austria.
Yeah, so a big combination of egos, right? So many proud monarchs. And yeah. You know, like I said, Napoleon's whole thing, since we've been watching this, is, you know, the divide and conquer strategy. Divide, conquer, take, you know, and it worked for him. And the thing about Leipzig is it's the time where it finally doesn't work for him. And all his enemies are allowed to finally combine to defeat him. And yeah, it's almost telling that, yeah, it took so much to take out Napoleon, you know?
All of whom were present at his headquarters. The plan finally agreed was for General Wittgenstein's corps group to lead an attack in 4 main columns, with 2 Austrian flanking attacks west of the Pleiße. At 8 AM, a bombardment began along the line, as Russian, Austrian and Prussian infantry regiments advanced across cold, muddy fields. Wachau soon fell to Russian infantry, but French artillery fire made it impossible for them to advance further. Victor's Second Corps then counterattacked, retaking the village at bayonet point.
Good job, Victor.
Wachau would change hands twice more that morning. These bloody contests for small Saxon villages would come to typify the fighting around Leipzig. At Markkleeberg, Kleist's Prussian Second Corps drove out the Polish defenders after bitter fighting, while on the left bank of the Pleiße, Merveldt's Austrian Second Corps struggled across broken ground to attack well-defended villages. Their assault on Konnewitz stalled, but with heavy losses, the Austrians got a toehold in Dörlitz. On the right flank, around 10 AM, Klenau's 4th Corps occupied the high ground of the Kolmberg and fought its way into Liebertwolkwitz. Napoleon, observing from Gallows Hill, ordered up Augereau's 9th Corps and the Young Guard in support. MacDonald's 11th Corps was now also arriving in position on his left. His troops retook the Kolmberg and counterattacked Liebertwolkwitz, driving out the Austrians and pursuing them over the fields beyond. The advance was only halted when Russian Cossacks were sighted on their open left flank.
The frickin' Cossacks,
warning that Bennigsen's army was not far off. The coalition offensive was going nowhere, with most of its modest gains lost to French counterattacks. But there was one sector where the coalition had more success that morning. General Goulay's Austrian Third Corps, with orders to threaten Napoleon's line of retreat, advanced over marshy ground towards Lindenau. Ney had to divert Bertrand's 4th Corps to reinforce the village and ensure the road to France was kept open. Napoleon was waiting for Ney's reinforcements before launching his attack on Schwarzenberg, but now 4th Corps was tied down at Lindenau, and there was more bad news from Ney. Blücher's army of Silesia was approaching from the northwest. Marmont's 6th Corps had to turn about to keep the Prussians at bay. Heavy fighting broke out around Möckern, the village itself held by elite French Marines, while Dąbrowski's Polish division clung on to Wiedrich, under attack from an entire Russian corps. This was a nasty surprise for Napoleon, who'd thought Blücher was still a day's march away. But the old Prussian general, hearing cannon fire to the south, had urged his men on and into the attack. Blücher intended to draw as many French troops onto himself as possible to assist Schwarzenberg's army of Bohemia. His actions and the bloody fight for Möckern may just have saved the coalition from defeat.
Blücher,
Independent
man.
watchdogs rate Susan Rubio as one of the most corrupt. After taking over $3 million from special interests, Rubio refused to make big oil lower their gas prices, and she let Big Pharma rip off dialysis patients. Susan Rubio, bought by special interests.
Yeah, Blücher is just very underrated, but he is a beast. Like, he's up there in terms of the Napoleonic military leaders era. He's up there, man. Now all hell was let loose. It seemed impossible that there could be any space between the bullets and balls which rained onto us. I'm so sorry, I'm so immature.
Napoleon was outnumbered across the whole battlefield. But in the south he still had a numerical advantage, not as large as he'd hoped, nor likely to last long. Schwarzenberg and Alexander were already moving up reserves, though Schwarzenberg now found that his were on the wrong side of the Pleiße River, costing precious hours. It was now or never for Napoleon. At 2 p.m, he ordered the attack to begin. A grand battery of 180 guns blasted the enemy lines. Then Victor's 2nd Corps, Lauriston's 5th Corps, and the Young Guard began their advance. In support, Murat gathered 2 entire cavalry corps, 10,000 horsemen, and led them in one of the great mass cavalry charges of the Napoleonic Wars. Cuirassiers of the 1st Heavy Cavalry Division broke through to the main enemy battery. Some even nearly reached the 3 coalition monarchs. But the ground was marshy and broken by fences and ditches. The French horses were soon exhausted and the squadrons disordered. Austrian cuirassiers and Russian Guard cavalry were coming up from the south. When these fresh Allied cavalry reserves charged the French, a great melee ensued. But the French were eventually driven back to their start line. Maison's division of the 5th Corps was involved in a desperate struggle for Geldengosse. The fighting swept back and forth through the village, the streets filling with dead and wounded from both sides. But as Russian and Prussian Guard regiments arrived to reinforce the village, the French were forced to fall back. Around 4 p.m, the Austrian Reserve Corps finally arrived and renewed the assault on Markkleeberg, one of the morning's objectives, which was finally secured. By 5 p.m, it was clear that Napoleon didn't have enough reserves to force a decisive outcome in the south. To the north, Möckern was being stubbornly held by French Marines with lethal close-range artillery support. But despite terrible losses, York's Prussian Corps continued to attack. Marshal Marmont himself was wounded twice, but remained in command. Finally, a brilliant charge by Prussian hussars triggered a French rout. Möckern fell as Marmont's corps streamed back towards Leipzig. As dusk fell around 6 p.m, fighting died out across the battlefield.
Yeah, this entire battle so far comes across as a tug of war, you know? Constantly Napoleon for a bit there really pushed forward but got pushed back, fighting between the villages, and just here it's like, yeah, it comes across like a total tug of war. And yeah, but the thing is, you're also seeing Napoleon is being pushed back. He doesn't have... It's the reserves, really, that made the biggest difference, at least in the southern area here. They just had more men and fresher men than Napoleon, you know? And yeah, Napoleon's just was so outnumbered at this point.
The first day of the battle had cost the French an estimated 25,000 casualties. The coalition, at least 30,000. Napoleon had come close, but failed to land a decisive blow. The chance for victory was slipping from his grasp.
Yeah, the longer this goes, Napoleon is like racing against time itself. 8 Corps have lost a third of their men and many officers. All ammunition stocks have been used up. We have not enough to maintain combat for 1 hour. Oh my gosh. Marshal Ponto... The Polish one. Dang, that's awful.
Sunday the 17th of October brought a lull, with both armies exhausted by the previous day's fighting. Napoleon needed to rest his troops and resupply them with ammunition, which was running dangerously low. He also sent a message to his father-in-law, Emperor Francis I, suggesting an armistice and finally offering concessions. But the Allies were no longer interested. They knew time was on their side. The only major combat that day occurred in the north, where Blücher continued to attack. Russian infantry stormed Eutrich and Gorlice. Russian hussars charged and routed part of Arrighi's 3rd Cavalry Corps. That day, Napoleon received 14,000 reinforcements, when Reynier's French Saxon 7th Corps arrived from the northeast. But the same day, the coalition received more than 100,000 reinforcements.
Oh my
as
gosh.
Their armies continued to converge on Leipzig.
Oh yeah, Napoleon... Oh boy, yeah, that's bad. Dang, just like, you're already bad. The situation was already bad, but here, have 100,000 more against you, Napoleon. Fresh, you know, and here ready to fight you. Like, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, that's bad. Yeah, Napoleon's just gonna be, like, pressed on all sides,
Colloredo's
basically.
Austrian 1st Corps. Bennigsen's Army of Poland. And Bernadotte's Army of the North, though the latter was widely criticised for his leisurely march to the battlefield.
Oh,
The next day, Napoleon would face odds of nearly 2 to 1. It was time for the Emperor to begin planning his retreat.
I write to you on the morning of a battle, the like of which has scarcely been seen in the history of the world. We have surrounded the French Emperor. This battle will decide the fate of Europe. And it did. It really did. Day 3, man.
On Monday morning, the sun shone across 40 square miles of battlefield, on which nearly 500,000 troops and 2,000 cannon were assembled. Soldiers from France, Germany, Russia, Austria, Poland, Italy, Sweden, the Netherlands, and even Britain. This was truly the Battle of the Nations. In preparation for his withdrawal, Napoleon pulled back his forces into a tighter defensive perimeter, and ordered Bertrand's 4th Corps to march west to secure the army's line of retreat. 2 divisions of the Young Guard under Marshal Mortier took their place at Lindenau. Schwarzenberg, meanwhile, planned to close the net on Napoleon with 6 converging attacks. Fighting in the south began around 8 AM, The Austrians took Dürlitz, but Marshal Oudinot led a counterattack at the head of a young Guard division and drove them out again. Schwarzenberg was so alarmed by this reverse that he sent orders to recall Goulay's 3rd Corps. General Barclay's troops initially faced little opposition as they took Wachau and Liebert-Volkwitz, scenes of such bitter fighting 2 days before, but now scarcely defended. Barclay then paused, waiting for Bennigsen to get into position on his right, before continuing his attack. Bennigsen's troops had more ground to cover, but towards noon, they'd driven back MacDonald's infantry and taken their objectives. They would now wait for Bernadotte's army to link up on their right, but the Army of the North was again making slow progress, for which many again blamed its commander, who seemed exceedingly cautious about facing his old master in battle.
Yeah. I think I've heard that the reason Bernadotte was moving a little slow is because I think he didn't trust some of the coalition leaders, or he was worried about them turning on him. Like, there's a sort of weary relationship, so he didn't commit as much or something. I don't know if that's completely accurate, but I think that is a reason. And yeah, but overall, the coalition strategy of just pressing Napoleon, yeah, it's the best, because yeah, they know they have the time. They know Napoleon's his back is to the wall. They know they have the manpower, so yeah, they're going with, you know, just pressure him, and Napoleon can't fight back. For once, Napoleon's always been against the odds, but for once the odds were just too great for even him to overcome. And yeah, I will say, I guess the only issue is that here, apparently he called this... Can you guys see my highlighted mouse, by the way? I don't know. I won't know until this video is done recording. But, yeah, I guess he called them back, which probably he might... I'm not sure if he was aware if that was the French's only escape, but you'd think he probably keep them there to press them back, because, yeah, capturing Napoleon, arguably what they would want to do, you know. I don't know.
Blücher, in contrast, did not hesitate to launch Russian infantry against Leipzig's northern defences, though their attack failed with heavy losses.
Mobile games are going big.
If all were demoralized and he appeared, his presence was like an electric shock. All shouted, "Vive l'Empereur!" and everyone charged blindly into the fire. Napoleon's presence was like, what did the Duke of Wellington say? Napoleon's presence was worth 40,000 men or something like that. Yeah, Napoleon was kind of an army onto his own, at least in terms of boosting morale, you know?
By 2 p.m, Napoleon was hard-pressed on all fronts, but holding his own. His attention was now focused on Probstheide, key to his southern front, under attack from Kleist's Prussian 2nd Corps. French troops had turned the village into a fortress and inflicted terrible losses on the advancing Prussians. Probstheide was soon engulfed in smoke and fire, as fighting raged on all sides. Some Prussian regiments lost half their men attacking the village, while 3 French generals were killed as they organised its defence. Napoleon even sent in Friant's division of the Guard to reinforce the position. To the north, Bernadotte's army was finally joining the battle in earnest. Marmont had assembled 137 guns around Schönefeld, which poured fire into the Russian ranks. In response, Bernadotte massed 200 guns of his own. The fields were soon strewn with the dead and wounded, as the sheer weight of fire made it impossible for either side to advance. Around 3 p.m, von Bülow's Prussian Corps, supported by Austrian Jaegers and its small British rocket detachment, attacked Paunsdorf. Renier's 7th Corps could not withstand the onslaught. An hour later, around 3,000 Saxon soldiers rushed over to the enemy and surrendered. The Saxons were deeply disillusioned with their French allies. Their main wish now was for a quick end to a war that had ravaged their homeland for many months. The hole in the line created by the Saxons' defection was soon plugged by Guard cavalry. But the coalition juggernaut could not be stopped. Towards dusk, under relentless Russian pressure, Marmont abandoned the burning ruins of Schönefeld, while the Prussians took Sellerhausen. In the south, Probstheide still held, but the situation was grim for Napoleon. The third day's fighting cost both sides another 25,000 casualties. Napoleon's army was exhausted, outnumbered, virtually encircled, and critically low on ammunition. Finally, the Emperor gave the order to retreat.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do, man. Sire, we will hold on. We are all ready to die for your majesty. Man, the loyalty Napoleon inspired is amazing, man. Like, yeah, I just don't know what else Napoleon could have done, man. Arguably, the biggest issue of this battle for Napoleon... Well, wait for this.
Overnight.
Yeah, I guess the only... It's funny to think that the biggest issue is because Napoleon... I think if Napoleon had probably pulled back, because I think last video he mentioned Napoleon didn't want to leave Germany, but maybe if he had pulled out and just, you know, let the coalition go there, he probably could have picked a more favorable area to have this big battle. Or if not, like, the other thing is just, I guess, logistics, right? He underestimated just how far his enemy were, and so he didn't... Yeah, so his plan was to take one out and then move on, but yeah, it's like, just making that simple mistake of not knowing where your enemy is resulted in all of this. Like, wow. You know, it's weird to think about that, but yeah, a simple mistake like that, just not knowing how long it would take an enemy, because I'm pretty sure if he knew they would be there in a day, he probably would have planned something else. Maybe would have, I don't know what else he would have done, but he obviously wouldn't have done what he did here, you know? I don't know, that's just like amazing, huh, in war, how just one lack of information, one piece of not understanding a certain place or the distance of an enemy just can just throw you completely off your game. Man, that's like so weird to think about.
Night, under cover of darkness and early morning fog, the French army withdrew behind Leipzig's walls, and at 4 a.m. began its retreat west, crossing the single bridge over the Elster River that led back to France. There'd been time and materials to build extra bridges, but in what would prove a serious oversight, no one had given the necessary orders. Furthermore, there was no clear plan for Leipzig's defence, which was left to a jumble of understrength units, mostly Poles and Germans. Napoleon left Leipzig around 10 a.m. Behind him there were scenes of mounting chaos and confusion, the city's streets jammed with troops, guns and wagons. The 20,000 wounded troops in the city had little hope of escape. 30 minutes later, shells began to rain on the city as the coalition launched an all-out assault from north, east and south. The rearguard held the city's gates for as long as they could, but they were soon overwhelmed by the enemy, and savage street fighting broke out across the city. A barge packed with gunpowder had been moored beneath the Elster Bridge, so that it could be quickly destroyed after the rearguard crossed. Around 2 p.m, a corporal lit the fuse when he saw Russian soldiers on the far bank, even though the bridge was still packed with troops, wagons and horses.
Oh no. Oh no.
The bridge was destroyed in a gigantic explosion that trapped 30,000 men and 30 generals on the wrong side of the river.
Oh my gosh. Oh, ow. Dang. Dang, that one hurt. Yeah, that even hurt me. That's... I don't even know how to put that into words. That's just a complete disaster. My goodness. Like, here I am shocked. I know that happened, but like, still, like, dude, Napoleon, that's so... Yeah, you're done, buddy. You're done. Like, dang, you're just done. All those French soldiers who were blown up on the bridge, probably, as they were crossing it. And all the ones left fighting, and they're like, no escape. That's a nightmare. I can't even imagine being in that situation. That is just, you know... Yeah, this is a complete disaster.
Panic broke out among those who suddenly found themselves cut off. Most became prisoners, but some tried to swim for it, including the Polish Prince Poniatowski, made a marshal by Napoleon just 3 days before. Weak from his wounds, he rode his horse into the river, but as it tried to climb the steep far bank, it rolled over him, and he was drowned.
Oh, dude.
Marshal MacDonald had also been cut off by the blast, and resolved to escape or die trying. He found a place where engineers had cut down 2 trees as a makeshift bridge, and made his attempt. And there I was, 1 foot on either trunk and the abyss below me. A high wind was blowing. I was wearing a large cloak, and fearing that someone would grab at it, I got rid of it. I was already 3/4 of the way across when some men decided to follow me. Their unsteady feet caused the trunks to shake, and I fell into the water. Fortunately, I could touch the bottom, but the bank was steep, the soil loose and slippery. Some of the enemy's skirmishers came up. They fired at me point blank and missed me, and some of our men who happened to be nearby drove them off and helped me out. I was wet from head to foot, breathless and sweating heavily from my efforts. Marshal Marmont, who had got across early in the day, gave me a horse. I wanted dry clothes more, but they were not to be had.
Man. Yeah. MacDonald got lucky there. The fact that they missed him at point blank, that's like divine intervention. Like, someone did not want him to die, you know? Dang, this is like... Following the Russian invasion, this might be one of the biggest disasters to have struck Napoleon's army. Yeah, they've never been routed like this before. And... yeah, Napoleon just lost even more men he couldn't replace through this. All in one go, one explosion. Now 30,000 men just gone.
The loss of the bridge turned what was already a heavy defeat for Napoleon into a disastrous one. Later that day, the 3 Allied monarchs met in the centre of Leipzig to celebrate their great victory. It had come at enormous cost. Exact numbers are impossible to establish, but in 4 days' fighting, the coalition armies suffered at least 52,000 casualties. Napoleon, who could less afford such losses, came off worse. 47,000 killed and wounded, 35,000 taken prisoner, 325 guns lost.
Yeah, Napoleon doesn't have the manpower. He already lacked the manpower after the Russian invasion, and he lost even more. Like, he just, like, man, like I said, the Grand Armée is just, it ain't grand anymore. I keep saying that, but it's true though. Like, so much loss, you know. It's grand in the sense that it's still impressive because Napoleon's leading it, but like in terms of numbers and stuff, heck, even experienced troops, like they lost a lot of that already.
More men were killed and wounded at Leipzig than in any European battle before the First World War. Sir George Jackson, the British ambassador to Austria, rode over the battlefield with Metternich, the Austrian foreign minister, 2 days later. "A more revolting and sickening spectacle I never beheld," he wrote. "Scarcely could we move forward a step without passing over the dead body of some poor fellow, gashed with wounds and clotted with blood, another perhaps without an arm or a leg, here and there a headless trunk, or a head only, which caused our horses to stumble or start aside. It made one's blood run cold to glance upon the upturned faces of the dead. We got over this field of glory as quickly as we could."
Yeah, you know, obviously they're celebrating because they defeated Napoleon, but in war, there's no glory in war, you know? Like, it's just a bunch of dead people, and I think this is like the grim reality setting in. Like, yeah, you know, on you hear through these stories and legends, yeah, war, these great conquerors and leaders winning these glorious battles, but I think the most sobering reality of a war is the aftermath battlefield, where it's just a bunch of bodies lying around and body parts and like crows eating from them, and there's blood everywhere and the smell of death and I guess cannons and muskets. Just, yeah, at that point it's like there's nothing beautiful about it. It's just an ugly, you know, an ugly, harsh reality at that point.
Join large-scale battles with military vehicles. The online action game War Thunder has received a major update.
All Europe was marching with us just a year ago. Today, all of Europe is marching against us. Yep. Yep. They are. Napoleon, that they were. I think it goes to show you that, yeah, Napoleon never had... These guys were never Napoleon's friends. Napoleon beat them into a sort of submission, and they followed reluctantly. Like, with the Russian invasion, you see it. Like, Austria and Prussia gave some troops, but, like, yeah, they were never Napoleon's allies. They were just biding their time until they could finally get to this moment, you know? This is what they've always wanted. Napoleon defeated.
Napoleon had suffered a calamitous defeat. He had lost the battle for Germany. His domination of Europe appeared at an end.
Yeah, he probably should... I know Napoleon's really stubborn about giving up Germany, but he might... I don't know, like I said, obviously Obviously the logistic part of not knowing how far the enemy was is what really affected him, I think, in this battle, but yeah, his stubbornness to leave Germany and willingness to gamble it all in such a, you know, time like this, you know, that's like, I don't know if it would have been better if he had moved back. Like, they were advising him, what, behind the Rhine? I think that probably would have been better, like, you know, like, I think some of his marshals were the ones advising him. I think that's what they said last video. Like, yeah, Napoleon probably should have probably should have. I don't know how well things would have gone in, but like, man, like, yeah, maybe that time it would have worked out. Who knows? But there's a lot of factors either way, right? But yeah, Napoleon probably should have taken a more defensive approach, at least in France, you know? I don't know.
With 80,000 survivors, he began a fighting retreat to the French border.
This really is Napoleon's biggest L in terms of a battle, you know? Like, this is the biggest L we've seen Napoleon, because it really is his biggest loss. This is what he gambled the fate of Europe on, you know? The fate of his empire, and it didn't work, man. You know, and it's sad because it's like Napoleon is just always taking these big risks, and they worked out so well most of the time. But yeah, it's like, it kind of goes to show you that luck runs out eventually, doesn't it? Like, after a while, eventually you'll roll a bad set of dice, if you will, you know, if you play Dungeons and Dragons. No matter how lucky you are, eventually you're gonna roll a nat 1, and it's not gonna be fun, you know?
There was now no chance of rescue for the 100,000 men trapped in garrisons across Germany and Poland, though some would hold out for another 5 months. Marshal Murat took his leave of the Emperor, assuring him of his loyalty, but secretly planning to cut a deal with the Allies to save his throne in Naples.
I'm not gonna lie, guys, Murat's kind of soured on me. I know he's very popular, and, you know, all that, but yeah, I won't lie, this is kind of a snake move. Like, I don't know. With Bernadotte, I'm pretty... Even though I joke, oh, Bernadotte's my least favorite, boo, Bernadotte, like, I get exactly Bernadotte's position. I already said it before, but his loyalty was to his, you know, thing. And I would feel like Murat is more of a traitor than Bernadotte ever was. Like, I don't know. You know, I don't know, just this whole back thing, like, hey, let me join you guys, screw Napoleon. Like, I don't know, there's just something like, Murat's kind of soured on me. I wouldn't put him in my top 5 marshals list, you know? I don't know. That's just me, personally. I know a lot of people still like Murat, but yeah, he has soured on me because of this whole trying to get behind Napoleon's back. And then, like, when it doesn't work, I believe the coalition does not accept him like they accepted Bernadotte. He tries crawling back to Napoleon. I don't know, it just reminds me of certain people I used to know. It's like, kind of like snakish, slimy behavior. I don't know. I'm probably being a bit too mean. I guess I can understand, you know. He probably just wants to remain king, but I don't know. I won't lie. Even though I could try to understand where he's coming from, I'm a little bit soured on him. I don't hate him, mind you, and I guess in my list of marshals I wouldn't put him too low. Not that low, but like, I don't know. I'm sure someone will write a long comment or two about, you know, why I probably shouldn't be like this towards Murat. But I don't know, man. It's just, I feel like, I don't know. I'm gonna stop talking.
It was the last time the two men saw each other. 11 days after the Battle of Leipzig, Napoleon's former allies, the Bavarians, tried to block his escape at Hanau with 40,000 men. The Bavarian commander, von Wrede, had served with Napoleon in many campaigns. But on seeing his deployment for battle, Napoleon remarked, "I made him a count, but I couldn't make him a general."
I know about this encounter, and it's such an epic line that Napoleon, even though he's completely lost, he sees this, he's like, huh, I got this, and just demolishes. I think he breaks through him, and like, man, Napoleon is still so impressive. Like, even though he's made mistakes and lost battles, like, he's still so impressive. And I don't think in terms of like military genius, he ever had a low point. I don't think there ever was a Napoleon at his worst in terms of like being a leader and being like a tactical genius. I think he was always just head and shoulders above everyone, even when he was losing. I don't know. He is so impressive.
The French Emperor then ordered the Imperial Guard to lead an attack that forced the enemy to fall back in disarray. The French army reached the safety of Mainz 3 days later. Napoleon himself pushed on to Paris to contain the political damage from his defeat. Behind him, his empire was being dismantled. On the 4th of November, the coalition announced the dissolution of the Confederation of the Rhine, several of its former members now joining the war against France. In the Illyrian provinces, local revolts, Austrian invasion, and British naval support brought an end to French rule. In North Italy, Eugène...
Dude, we are literally seeing Napoleon work so hard for his empire. And it's just like, how quickly it's being dismantled. Like, literally, what, a year before this, he had the largest army in Europe. He had Europe by the gut, you know? And it's just like, one invasion later, one loss at Leipzig, just all gone. And it's like so quick, you know? Like, even Rome took a while to fall, you know? Like, you see these empires, they took a bit, but here it's just so... It came so fast, and it left so fast, this Napoleon's empire. There's just something, like, tragic about this, you know? It's like watching the fall of Rome again. Like, there is something really tragic about this.
was retreating steadily before the advance of von Hiller's Austrian army. While in Hamburg, Marshal Davout, with 34,000 troops, would soon be cut off and under siege.
Oh, not Davout.
Napoleon's situation was desperate. But in the next campaign...
They even got the MVP Davout, the best marshal, under siege, like... Yeah, at that point I'd give up. I'd be like, oh, Davout's can't help me? We're done. I would give up.
fought for France itself.
The 6 Days
Napoleon would
campaign?
prove that he was still the master of war.
Heck yeah, he is. The 6 Days campaign for France, Paris, I think is my favorite Napoleon campaign. It is, I think, demonstrates his genius, and it's just any other battle. Yeah, we've seen so much battles from Napoleon in the series, but I seriously think the 6 Days campaign is my personal favorite and the one that impresses me most about Napoleon. Because here he is, defeated, at his lowest moment, and he's just collecting L's like it's nobody's business. Like, you know, I don't know. I'll talk more about it next time, but it is my favorite campaign of Napoleon. And yeah, guys, that's really all. That's it, huh? Like, Napoleon gambled big, but minor little mistakes. Like, I guess not knowing underestimating how fast the enemies would show up, or like not knowing that contributed to Napoleon making a stand. The botch retreat due to that one guy who lit the fuse way too early. Yeah, Murad trying to turn on Napoleon. Murad. But yeah, just a lot happened, and now basically the end of Napoleon's empire. That was basically the end of Napoleon's empire we witness. It's just France now, and it'll only just be France. Like, Napoleon's empire is gone. And yeah, now we're about to witness his complete end at you know, the campaign for France. I'll leave it at that, guys. I will see you all in the next video. And, you know, I want to hear your guys' opinion on things. What do you think? I know some of you are much more, well, I would say you're much more knowledgeable than I am in regards to, you know, Napoleon. So feel free to let me know. I kind of want to hear from you guys. What do you think Napoleon should have done different? Let's just... I know many of us want to probably just say, don't invade Russia, don't invade Spain, continental system. Let's just say after the invasion of Russia. What do you think Napoleon could have done differently to maintain his power? I'm gonna say accept the Frankfurt proposals. You know, but feel free to let me know. What do you think Napoleon could have done differently in your own opinions? I would really like to know, actually. I think many of you will give very interesting answers. And with that said, I look forward to reading them. So I'll see you guys next time. Bye, everyone.